Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 6 coverage of the 2014 U.S. Chess Championship in St. Louis, Missouri. Today we're going to take a look at the game Alexander Lenderman versus Sam Shankland. There were actually 4 decisive results today, and it was a little bit hard to choose which game to look at, but since this game was affecting the leader, it seemed like a likely candidate and a pretty interesting game. So I mentioned briefly about Alexander previously. Let me say a few words about Sam. Sam is a 22-year-old grandmaster from Orinda, California. He has a FIDE rating of 2634, and he's currently the number 6 ranked player in the U.S., active chess player in the U.S. He's not, let's see, he's actually higher rated than his opponent Alexander Lenderman, but Lenderman has been tearing up the tournament so far and is a full point ahead of everybody else. The other thing I wanted to mention about Sam is even though he's quite young at 22, he's not the youngest player in the tournament. The youngest one is actually Daniel Naroditsky, who's 18, and then there's also Ray Robson, who's 19. So maybe we'll see some of their games later. But Sam at 22 is the third youngest player in the tournament. Okay, so let's get to the game. Alex Lenderman has the white pieces and kicks off with d4. And Sam plays d5. And after c4, e6, we get a classic Queen's Gambit decline, which is already a bit of a surprise. This is not one of Sam's main openings. And I heard him talking after the game. He said he chose this one deliberately because he noticed this opening, because he noticed that Alexander had very good opening preparation. He was aware of what his opponents were playing and had some surprises, novelties prepared for them, so he didn't want to run into anything like that, and just tried to play a solid opening that he knew well enough, even if it's not one he plays regularly. So Alex goes knight f3, the second choice here, but it quickly transposes back into the main line after knight f6, knight c3. So black plays bishop g7 without waiting for the bishop g5 move, and in fact white decides here to play bishop f4 instead of bishop g5. So this position with bishop g5 has been seen a lot, and bishop f4 is slightly less common, but the second choice here. And I think it's become more popular recently as grandmasters are just kind of searching around for novel ways to play the opening. New opening moves sometimes freshen up a position and allow them to try different things. Black castles and white plays e3. So you see a lot of the same ideas, just getting the bishop outside the pawn chain. The light squared bishop now defends the c pawn, so no longer have to worry about recapturing, how to recapture if black chooses to take on c4. Black continues the knight bd7, and after queen c2 plays c5. And queen c2, there were alternatives to queen c2, primarily involving developing the bishop so that white can castle. But this is still all in the opening book. And after c5, the move rook d1, this move is not in my opening book, but actually Sam mentioned that he'd seen this move before and was aware of it. So this is probably a fairly recent development in opening theory. To play this move rook d1 in this position. It is one of the suggestions of the chess engine, so that's where a lot of these moves come from, I guess, these days. So black plays c takes d4, and white takes back with the rook, which I guess was the idea of rook d1. And now black plays queen a5. And so somewhere around here, they're probably out of the opening book. And in fact, the next move seems to be maybe a little bit inaccurate. The chess engine here is recommending the move bishop g3, and we can take a look at this. One of the issues was that there was always this threat of e5, e6 to e5, which would fork the rook and the bishop. Now, it wasn't possible previously because the bishop and the knight were both guarding that square, so it would have just gotten taken. But it may become a threat later on, so bishop g3 gets it out of trouble. And one possible continuation is h6, just keeping the knight out of the g5 square. And knight to d2, allowing the move e5, and then playing knight to b3, chasing the queen away. Now this is just one line, and then eventually the rook drops back to d2 or d1. gives maybe some slight edge for white still, but just goes to show this is a bit of a tricky position. There was a certain amount of maneuvering to get the rook out of trouble. So what white played here, what Alex played, is a very natural move. He just retreated the rook right away. But apparently this is about equal. The engine rates this as about even. Knight b6 was played. And now knight d2, I guess with the same idea, coming over here and chasing the queen away. But black plays the move bishop b4 and immediately starts putting pressure on this knight. Now knight b3 is a possible move here, but instead white chose to play a3. And this maybe is a bit of a mistake. At this point, actually, the computer starts to give black a bit of an advantage. Now the problem is after a3 that black just takes here. He gives up the bishop pair, but after queen takes c3, white is left with these isolated pawns over here that may become weak later in the game, so this may be a problem. Black is just continuing to develop normally here. Bishop d7, bishop e5 was played. Yeah, one idea, if I back up for a second, one idea here, rather than playing a3, well, first of all, knight to b3 was possible, hitting the queen, but actually the top choice of the chess engine is to play bishop e5 here, defending the knight, and leaving this knight on the d2 square for the moment. And so that just prevents the exchange here, or at least prevents it from causing pawn damage. Okay, but as I said, a3 was played, and we went down this line. Exchange, and the queens are off, and now bishop e5 was played. Yeah, this is the position we were at. So black continues with bishop a4, just activating the bishop, and cancel that. And the rook went to b1, chasing the rook around. Although maybe this is a decent square for the rook, but there's still this potential problem of the c-pawn, which comes to the fore shortly. So knight f to d7, chasing the bishop. Bishop goes to d6, hitting the rook, and now the rook comes over here to c8. Now we see pressure starting to build on the c file. And at this point, actually it's a significant edge for black, because there's just no good way to defend this c-pawn. If we back up a few moves, right here, instead of rook b1, the chess engine was recommending just playing rook to c1, which doesn't really make sense until you see later in the game. I mean, why would you put the rook here behind a pawn, a very passive kind of move, and not a move a typical grandmaster wants to play? But the way it was played, putting the rook on an active file, just loses material. So white exchanges here, and then plays knight to f3. And now black could grab the pawn immediately, but it's interesting, he throws in this little finesse first, rook to c6, hitting the bishop. And this is, I find this in a lot of master play. They will sometimes, instead of doing the most obvious move, they'll throw in some intermediate move to just discoordinate their opponent's pieces a little bit, and then go ahead and play the move that you were expecting all along. Just these little things can add up to a bigger advantage over the long course of a game if you stick with it rigorously. Okay, white played bishop to b4 here, just getting the bishop out of trouble. Well, it wasn't really in trouble there, but getting it back to a more secure square and chasing the rook. The rook drops back to c7. And now bishop to e2. So white can maybe castle eventually, and this bishop may come over here to challenge the bishop on a4 at some point. So at this point, if we pause and take stock, it looks like black is pretty much just a clear pawn up. There's some advantage that white has due to the bishop pair, some compensation, but yeah, black has a pretty decent edge at this point. So knight c4, and now knight to d4. The game continues, however, and knight to f6. So after this, and rook c1, well, the engine still is giving a pretty good edge to black. The edge for black never reached full pawn compensation, but it has maybe half a pawn, and so there's some compensation for white in this position, but probably not enough. So now it becomes a question of whether white can hold the position or whether black can win. So it's black's turn. He played rook a to c8, just putting more pressure on the c file. Knight to f5 was played. pretty dangerous looking move. I mean, white with his bishop pair and the active pieces is trying to find that compensation, and this knight e7 threat looks pretty strong. And black here plays a very surprising move, so if you might want to... there's a lot of different moves black could play, including just king to h8. But he played a move that's pretty funny here, so if you want to think about what's a strange move that black could play that would deal with this threat of knight e7. Okay, if you want to think about it some more, pause the video. I'm going to give the answer away. He played the move knight d6. So, like I said, it wasn't the only move in the position, but it's one of the moves, and it actually works. So you think, this is crazy, because it's under attack from two different pieces, so obviously it's not long for this world. But at the same time, when that knight moved, it opened up this attack on the c file, and that has to be dealt with first. So rook takes c7, rook takes c7, and now white plays the move knight e7 check. So it's getting a bit tricky. If the rook takes the knight, then the bishop takes the knight and pins the rook. No, that's not a pin, so hang on. Rook takes e7 is possible. I take it back. This was not played, but it's just an exchange of pieces. So and black remains a pawn up. But what black chose to play here was just king f8, walking out of the check and attacking the knight and asking it where it's going. And now the funny move, knight to g6 check. And once again, the knight, well, it's the other side now. This knight is on a square where it can just be taken. But if you take the knight, now it's much worse, because the bishop takes this knight with check and forks the rook and the king. So taking the knight is a big mistake. White just plays, or black just plays king to e8, once again just walking away from the check. And now white castles, preparing to bring his rook into the game and just leaving the knight sitting here under attack from two pawns. But of course, black's knight is under attack too, so if he were to take the knight, he would lose this knight. So instead, black plays the move knight d to e4, and now this knight finally has to retreat and goes to e5. So after that dust is settled, after that tactical sequence, once again, black just remains a pawn up. White tried some tricks there, but nothing really panned out for him. And still some compensation, but maybe not quite enough. Black plays b6 just to secure this pawn so the rook doesn't have to always be defending it. And also maybe preparing the move a5 at some point to kick this bishop. So white played the move rook to a1, just preparing to defend this pawn if the bishop gets chased away. This pawn might come under fire, and a5 is played. And now the bishop drops all the way back to e1. So not a happy move, but the bishop just did not have a lot of squares. Let's see, is the engine? Yeah, no, the engine says, in fact, bishop to e1 is the only move. So if we look at all these squares, king, the knight is controlling these squares, knight's controlling those squares. Yeah, so bishop to e1 is really the only move. So black is being, white is being pushed back. Black plays knight c3 here. Cancel that. Knight c3, attacking the bishop, and the bishop goes to d3. Now knight f to e4, and you can see black's pieces are really getting active. Although, again, it's the evaluation from the chess engine is still in the range of half a pawn in favor of black. So there's still some compensation for white remaining in this position. White plays knight to f3, and bishop to b5 is played here. I think the exchanges will favor black. If he can just get the pieces off, he can win with an outside passed pawn. So judicious exchanges work in black's favor. Bishop takes, knight takes. I don't think there was anything better. If we back up, well, the bishop could have retreated to f1. That's what the engine suggests, but then black could take it anyway. So this is almost as good, about equivalent to retreating the bishop. And now a4, the knight took back, and then a4 to chase the knight away. Knight goes back to c3. And white is trying to activate his pieces, get his knight in a good blockading square. Rook to c4 attacking the knight and putting pressure on the pawn. And now f3 attacking black's knight. So this knight goes to c5. Even more pressure on this pawn. It looks like this guy is a goner. Bishop takes c3 though, getting rid of one of the attackers. Rook takes c3. So the pawn lives for a little bit. Knight to b5 now. And rook takes e3. So white is giving up this pawn, but it's just a momentary loss of a pawn because he has an idea. I was just wondering if there's other moves here. I guess there's no good way to defend that pawn. Okay. Well, it is defended for the moment by the rook, but this rook is going to grab that in the long run, it looks like. So, but white leaves this pawn hanging on e3, but he has this move here, knight to c7 check. The king comes forward to attack it, and then he grabs the pawn, getting a pawn back, but still white's a pawn down, but attacking the rook. Rook goes to b3, defending the b pawn. And now rook to d1, defending the knight. At this point, black's advantage has grown somewhat, and now he's more than a pawn to the good, because the weakness of this pawn is starting to become an issue. Rook to d1 maybe was a mistake. Looks like knight to f4 is the best try for white. But anyway, rook to d1 was played. King to c6, getting away from the discovered check. And now knight to e7 check. King goes to c7. And rook to d4. So developing his rook and defending the pawn from the side. So a little bit of a sequence to try and activate his rook. But rook to a3 was played. And now there's just too many pieces on this pawn. It's going to fall. Knight to d5 check was played, putting off the inevitable for a bit. Knight to e7 check, and king to b7. So black doesn't want a repetition here. And now rook to d8. There was basically no way to hold on to this pawn anymore. Black takes a pawn. Rook to f8 was played, and now just rook to d4. So at this point, white resigned. He could consider taking the pawn. Go ahead and just show a few moves here. But rook d1 check, king to f2, and rook to d7 is the chess engine suggestion. Now if he grabs another pawn, just a4. I guess these pawns are just going to roll, and there's no way to stop it. The engine evaluation has gone to -9, so that means it can see that one of these guys is becoming a queen at the end. So at this point, Alex Lenderman resigned, and pretty good game, I thought. Let's summarize. With that loss, Alex is still, with 4 out of 6, tied for first place, but Varuzhin Akobian played a nice game, had a win against, let's check here, had a win against Akobian, against Ramirez. And so he's at 4 out of 6 and tied with, I'll put the position, this is how the game ended. He's tied at first place with 4 out of 6 with Lenderman. In second place, there's 2 players with 3.5 out of 6 points, Gadakomsky and Alexander Onashek. So that's the way things stand right now. The race is really tightening up, and we're into about halfway through the tournament. We'll see how things go in the home stretch. I wanted to mention, speaking of Varuzhin Akobian and Alejandro Ramirez, they are both lecturers at the St. Louis Chess Club, and which has a YouTube channel. So if you check out the St. Louis Chess Club YouTube channel, you'll see some lectures from Alejandro Ramirez and also from Varuzhin Akobian. They're pretty interesting players. So that's it for this round, and I will see you again soon. Bye.